Welcome, and thank you for tuning into The City Imagines Kill Them All, hosted by The Word on the Street. I'm David Alexander, and I'll be your host this evening. The Word on the Street is a festival of books, ideas, and imagination. But we're more than a festival. WOTS is a community. After moving our festival online last fall, we're extremely excited to continue bringing you events throughout the year. This is episode 3, season 2 of our City Imagines series, and we hope you'll join us each month for upcoming events like this one. Before I invite our moderator onto the broadcast, I want to acknowledge that the Word on the Street Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabe and Allied Nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. Takaronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people with long histories on this land. We are privileged to live, work, and create in this territory and strive to act with awareness and solidarity. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land you occupy, wherever you're tuning in from. Before we start tonight's discussion on Pasha Malla's new novel, Kill Them All, we have a few announcements. First, on the topic of books and commerce, the Word on the Street will be launching a new WOTS Weekly Features newsletter in April, where we'll share weekly deals from local businesses and bring you live mini conversations with exhibitors and authors. We'll be announcing more details about how to sign up for this new program through the WOTS newsletter and social media in the coming weeks. We also want to invite you to check out our Book of the Month playlist right here on our YouTube channel. The latest conversation is with Nathan Negan Newton-Adler on his book, Ghost Lake, a collection of stories about brushes with the supernatural, creatures of Ojibwe cosmology, the spirit world, and monsters. If you want to be the first to know about new videos from the Word on the Street, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you enjoy tonight's talk, please give this video a like to help others find it as well. And for more information about what we do or to sign up for our newsletter, you can visit us at toronto.thewordonthestreet.ca. Without further ado, please welcome Shawn Micallef. Shawn is the author of Stroll, Psychogeographic Walking Tours of Toronto, Full Frontal TO, and The Trouble with Brunch, Work, Class, and the Pursuit of Leisure. He's a weekly columnist at the Toronto Star, a senior editor and co-owner of Spacing, and teaches at U of T. And his most recent book is Frontier City, Toronto on the Verge of Greatness. Hi, Shawn.
Hi, David. Thanks for that. So go ahead.
I was just, before we get started, I wanted to ask you, have you ever worked at a mall?
I have worked at a mall, yeah. I worked for 5 years when I was in undergrad and into grad school at Music World, the least cool of the big record stores.
Excellent, excellent. I worked in CompuCenter at the Eaton Center. So, you know, kind of a cool mall to be associated with, I guess, as far as these things go.
That's the mother of all malls.
Yeah, and that was during high school. I learned some valuable merchandising skills, which I've put to work behind me on my bookshelf.
Nice. I want to buy one of those books, actually.
Excellent, excellent. They're not for sale, though. Sorry.
You didn't learn enough. Okay,
I'll turn it over to you to introduce Pasha.
Okay, thanks, David. So yeah, let's please welcome Pasha Malla, whose fiction has won the Danuta Gleed Literary Award, the Trillium Book Award, the Arthur Ellis Award, and several national magazine awards, being shortlisted for the Amazon.ca Best First Novel Award and the Commonwealth Prize, and has been longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize and the International Impact Dublin Literary Award. Hey, Pasha.
Hey.
Maybe I'll ask you the same question. Have you ever worked at the mall?
Yeah, I worked most recently in undergrad also for one Christmas season at the Body Shop in Masonville Mall in London, Ontario as a stock boy. And that was quite an interesting experience. I didn't know, but on Christmas Eve, there's this onslaught of men that arrive at the Body Shop in a panic, and they all buy the same. It's like an identical, like $17 gift basket. There's like a line of these men that snakes from the till, like all through the store and into the mall. for hours, like all of Christmas Eve, the entire day that it's open. So it's like the last minute desperation shop. I don't know who they're buying for, like a mother-in-law or something like that. But and then in high school, I worked at a Famous Players movie theater in what was then the London Muse and now no longer exists, which was like a failed downtown mall in London. And when I worked there, the movie theater was the only open business in the mall. So it was a formative experience, and certainly one that informed this book, because it was creepy to walk through this abandoned shopping mall, huge abandoned shopping mall, to go to work every day. Well, every day that I went to work anyway.
Yeah, when growing up in Windsor, we would sometimes go to London because the malls were somehow better, and they had different stores. They had an Eaton's, and that Galleria Mall downtown was really wild. It had like a whole bridge over a street, which was fantastic. It just seemed like the big city. My friend and I skipped out of grade 12, I think. We somehow got this ruse that we had to go do something, but he picked me up early in the morning, and our idea was to drive to Toronto to walk up and down Yonge Street and go to the Eaton Centre. But going up the 401, we realized Toronto's far and we chickened out, so we spent the day in London.
Do you know which malls? You usually went to the Galleria. Did you ever go to like White Oaks?
White Oaks for sure, because it was right off the 401.
Yeah.
And especially for when you're with the parents who were averse to traversing new cities, the White Oaks, you could almost like see it from the 401. So it was like hop in and hop out.
That was a great mall. It was a little bit fancy. It always seemed like a little upscale to me. I think I've only ever been to White Oaks once, but it's still there. And
yeah, definitely.
Thriving.
And then sometimes going up to Masonville, which was like the other side of London, which was very exotic London, Ontario, because you had to go through the whole city.
Yeah, that was my side, the north end. Masonville was not quite local to where I grew up, but was with a sort of big mall that, you'd go and do your sneaker browsing at or record shopping. Yeah, Masonville, and for a while they had a mini golf course, which was kind of exotic, indoor mini golf at the mall.
I guess this is Canada and we have snow, and London's in the snow belt of Ontario. It kind of stands to reason that they kind of expanded to this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a teenager in London, I mean, in the winter, if you didn't play hockey, there wasn't a lot of like recreational activity. I mean, there's the Byron Bump where, we would go skiing, but you'd spend time at the mall on the weekends. It was a great place to be as a teenager.
Yeah, even when you're a bit younger, when you're kind of still in your parents' charge, when they would have to drop you off at places, getting dropped off at the mall with your friends, like as if the mall is like a babysitter, but that kind of freedom for kids, who grew up in suburbia, it was like being dropped off in the middle of a city.
And at that age too, like an entire relationship can begin, go through all the throes of like a torrid love affair and end in one day at the mall. Like it's a real, like, there always seemed to be a lot going on at the mall. Like a lot could happen and a lot did. Masonville also, when I was like 12 or 13, had a youth gang that kind of patrolled the exits, stealing kids' hats. So Masonville is like also a little dangerous. But yeah, anyway, yeah, malls are great. I still love malls. You still enjoy going to the mall?
I do. When I go back to Windsor, Windsor's a car town. There's not a lot of public life on the streets. There is in some places, but I don't mean to run Windsor down in any way. But the mall is sort of where I go just to see other Windsor people walking around. And I do that usually a few times a year, and inevitably run into somebody from high school, which wouldn't happen if I was walking, on a street in Windsor. So it's like seeing the community. I know you wrote a piece in the Globe recently about going to the mall just to watch the kind of public life.
Buddy, it's okay. It's my dog. Sorry, he's being moved by this conversation. Yeah, and I don't even know if it's like so much people watching. It's just I really like the atmosphere of the mall. Like any mall, and we talked about this a little over email. Like, I think I'm similar to you in that anywhere I go in the world, I can go to the mall and I kind of know what it's going to be like. There's versions of malls, but I like going to malls and other places because there's a kind of, relatively generic experience in the mall. Like the layout is always relatively similar, and I can always orient myself in the mall. I kind of know who I am. It's like a reset whenever I'm traveling. So yeah, I still really like going to the mall. And I mean, that thing in the Globe was kind of like about how much I miss. I miss, like many people, miss lots of things, but one of the things I've been missing lately, I guess because the book came out and I've been thinking about it, was going to the mall. And there's some great malls. Like I live in Hamilton. There's a couple of, like Jackson Square is a really quite unusual but kind of amazing mall with a terrific movie theater with reclining, luxurious fake leather seats, and a strange layout. And Limeridge Mall is like a good solid kind of like mall with a bay.
all Canadian malls must have a bay.
Yeah.
The downtown mall in Hamilton, it's like built into like office towers, and it has this fantastic like green roof, probably made when green roofs weren't even called green roofs. It was just a 1970s brutalist like landscape up there. That's kind of fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's Jackson Square.
Yeah. So the book is called Kill the Mall, and presumably you wrote most of it before the pandemic, and now that the malls, the future of malls is in question, do you feel bad calling it Kill the Mall?
No, I feel great because it's such a goofy title. It's always been the goofiest title, and it was kind of like a joke title. I often just have my title to file something silly as I'm working on it, and then find my way to a title. Like my last book was called Brown Ice until like very close to publication date, when I gave it the actual title Fugue States, which it ended up being. And then the more I wrote of this book, the more the goofy title sort of fit it. And I don't feel bad. I mean, it's about my, it's not, the book's not really like a love letter to malls. It's sort of one of the things it's trying to do is like capture a kind of feeling of conflict about enjoying a space that is like, commercial space, and the kind of interesting ironies that happen in a commercial space that becomes public space depending how people use it, and without kind of disregarding the fact that people are trying to make a living there as well, I hope. So there's like, I don't know, I feel like there's just kind of like interesting tensions and ironies within the mall itself that I guess was one of the starting points for the book. But really the major starting point of the book was like going back to this experience as a teenager and remembering how creepy that was to be in a kind of half. And I mean, I think many of us have been to these malls that are kind of like halfway to being completely abandoned or nearly abandoned. And it's such a uncanny and destabilizing experience, I think, to just sort of like walk through these like alleys of, I don't know if you're feeling maudlin, like broken dreams. But yeah, I still like the title. I think it's funny. I mean, it's so bad that it's funny to me.
No, I was just kidding, because it's just interesting that the malls and their future and just retail in general has been such a conversation lately. And you really evoke that kind of echoey, half-empty mall, or dead malls, as they're sometimes called. There's whole blogs about dead malls and people exploring them, and that whole landscape. And you write about it so well, and it was eerie reading the book in the past couple of weeks, because it's like you were writing of a COVID landscape of all these kind of shuttered stores that is almost our reality now. Walking on main streets and just seeing these. It's actually hard to kind of gauge so far because we're still in the middle of it. Yeah,
I mean, I hope it doesn't feel like cruel or facetious to me. I mean, it's really not wasn't my intention. But like, I mean, this book was supposed to come out last February. It was, or last May, sorry. And it's been, can you hear my dog crying?
That's okay. He just wants to go to the mall and he's not allowed.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he's anxious. He's waiting at the door. He's got his shopping bags and wallet out. So yeah, I mean, it was scheduled to come out in May, and it was postponed, hopefully in retrospect until February. I think with the assumption that things would be a little more open, which, as we know, they're not. But yeah, I don't think it's a particularly prescient book. I mean, certainly, there are other writers who've written about what's going on with far more acuity than I have. There's this amazing book. I wrote about a thing about it actually, called I Burn Paris by Bruno. I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly, but his first name is Bruno and his last name is something Polish. And that book was written in the 1920s, and it sort of like presages a pandemic. It's set in Paris, but one of the things that comes out of this pandemic is the sort of like stratifications of class and race become much more accentuated. And then out of that, there's a movement to defund the police. And I was reading this book, and I bought it in 2012 when the translation into English came out. And I was reading it and would read passages aloud to my partner that sounded exactly like the news that day. So, I mean, there's better books than mine for that strange coincidence that sometimes feels like fortune telling that happens in fiction. But no, this is about other stuff, I think.
Well, I mean, it's interesting when you go to the mall. It seems like public space. It's where everyone hangs out, from kids to old people. But it's the rules are different, right? It's like if you hoisted a protest sign in the mall, the security guards would probably come and get you quickly. The best way to disappear in the mall is like hold a shopping bag, and because you're doing what you're supposed to do. So it's a strange space because it acts like it's the sidewalk, but it's not the sidewalk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that was interesting, or I don't know if it was interesting too, but like something I was thinking about when I was reading this book was like how the mall, whether it's public or private space, like it's communal space, right? Like however that community exists within like whatever parameters or rules of the mall. And the character in this book finds himself in this mall that is completely depopulated, except for, one or two people and some teenagers working in the food court. But it's like the emptiness and the lack of community and the isolation that I think was like what I kind of wanted to get at here. And I like that when, fiction in general, like uses, sort of upends how we think about spaces and turns them into something different by kind of like reimagining how they're being used by people, I guess.
Yeah, and you really dip into the kind of underlying sinister aspects of the mall really well. Can you give like the conceit of the book of how the character got in?
So the story of the book, such as it is based around this character who applies for a residency to live in a shopping mall. And when I came up with this idea, it seemed like a hilarious, because I've done a few artist residencies and writer residencies at the Toronto Public Library, which is amazing. And at the Burton House and at a couple of universities, and a lot of artists and writers get these gigs as sometimes as a place to live, and sometimes as like I guess a kind of form of patronage or employment or whatever. And I just thought it would be kind of wacky to put one in a mall. And I mean also like sort of thinking about the production of commodities, and when you're in a residency, there is some pressure that you have to produce something, or you apply with a project and you're supposed to do the project while you're there. Like you're not a very successful resident if you go somewhere and think. So so that was kind of thinking around this. But so what happens is this person has like a very or at least presents himself as having a very rosy picture of what a mall is, a very idealistic perception of what a mall is supposed to be. And then he gets to this mall and discovers, no, it is none of these things. It is not a thriving kind of mini metropolis. And there's not all these like ways to satisfy your dreams through commerce. And so that's the setup. And then the mall just gets weirder and weirder and weirder as the book goes. There's a kind of like sub mall where there's ghosts and sentient armies of ponytails and carnivorous cars and what else is down there?
Pony?
An actual pony. Yeah. So yeah, that's the kind of, I guess, the premise. And I mean, I guess eventually this character is trying to escape the mall and can't escape the mall.
Mhm.
But yeah, the process of writing this book was kind of fun. Like I had no plan. I just set up a schedule where the book was going to be in 12 parts. I was going to write one part a month, and I was going to be done in a year. Like I guess a kind of like, almost like factory line production sort of idea. As a response to the fact that it's taken me forever to write my two other novels, like 14 years combined between the two of them. So yeah, I wanted to write something quick and fun and without a plan, and I wanted to try to make myself laugh, which I accomplished a couple times. So yeah, this was, I mean, I don't know if one should boast about how much fun one had writing one's own book, but I did have a blast writing this. Like I entertained myself kind of every day almost. So I guess in some way that was a success.
Well, it's fun. It's fun to read, so you could tell that you enjoyed it and enjoyed the subject matter that you were writing about.
Thank you.
And that line between the public part of the mall and the behind the scenes mall, like and the character like almost tiptoes and sneaks into the back alleys of the mall, the back hallways and the basement. I mean, it reminded me of working for the mall and the times I got to like take the garbage out and you had to go down these passages. It was like seeing the alt mall, right? Like the behind the scenes, all these doors, people probably smoking inside then because it was the 90s. And when there's always something a little bit off about it because it didn't have the shiny public face. But even today, like walking in the mall parking lots, there's always some dude idling in his car. There's like, it's just a thing that every mall has. And now with tinted windows, you can't tell. It's like, oh, there's somebody there. And it just spooks me out every time. It's like that you don't have to scrape very far to get down to the sinister layer of malls.
Oh, absolutely. And I love any space, like these sort of hidden spaces, like the backstage of a theater and like just the stuff that isn't the public facing version of it. I had a friend, I lived in New York for a couple of years, and I had a friend there who was an archaeologist, a friend who was visiting, and a friend of his from grad school worked at the Museum of Natural History. And he was like, oh, we can get in for free. And I was like, yeah, that's great, but I don't really care. I want to see all the behind the scenes stuff. Like I want to walk around in the hallways where there's like those drawers and drawers and drawers of like arrowheads and things like that. Like, I just love that kind of, the behind the scenes of anything. So I think, the first time I worked in a mall that I really got a sense of that was this job at the body shop. Cause like my job was like taking out the garbage. I developed a real love for breaking down cardboard, which I maintain to this day. Like recycling day is one of my favorite days when I get to like break down and flatten all the cardboard. I was attracted to that aspect of like someone discovering that, like having a version of the mall, the sort of like public facing version of the mall that's like, the storefronts and, the spaces that the public kind of inhabits, but then the discovery of what's behind that in this book is at least, a lot more sinister.
Yeah, there's a bit of a like 1984-ness of Big Brother in like the mall management. And I remember any mall you go to, there's always like management, like down some hallway. And now it's changed a little bit because at least like in Toronto, some of the malls are CF Eaton Center, right? Cadillac Fairview. So like the brand of that owner is no longer kind of like obscured. It's almost kind of dragged to the front now.
Yeah. And I discovered that when I was writing this thing for the Globe about what I knew as Masonville Mall, that it's actually called CF Masonville Place. And yeah, there's something even more sinister about that. Like as though, I had this, some sort of absurd idealistic version that a mall was named the same way like a park is named, which is, obviously it's not, it's corporate. It's a corporate entity that runs it. But yeah, just the branding of that is a little bit creepy to me. And it wasn't something I was thinking about when writing the book. I found this out a few weeks ago, but I think that like the tensions in that were kind of the tensions that I wanted to sort of inhabit with this character and try and explore some, just some feelings, I guess, of how those spaces can turn uncanny so quickly,
Yeah, I think the TV show The Stranger Things used the mall very well, right? And kind of played on that nostalgia we have of this familiar place, but also gave it a bit of a sinister level too.
Yeah, and I mean, there's another show that uses that same mall and same food court. I just saw like some stills from it's another TV show or movie recently that's shot in the same mall, because that mall has such a quintessential 80s mall aesthetic, like with the neon and everything. Yeah,
it's hard when one of the interesting things about and I should say to the viewers, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll get to them about Kill the Mall or the mall in general. The way malls like renovate, so like a mall that's a going concern will always be renovating every few years, it seems, just to kind of keep on top of fashion, because it's such a fashion place. Whereas like a dead mall, or like partially dead mall that just kind of lingers, they almost seem like aesthetic time machines too, which makes them doubly interesting. There's a kind of semi-mall at Yonge and Bloor here in Toronto called Cumberland Terrace, which is one of my favorite ones, and it's frozen in 1975 or so with all these kind of colorful tiles and stuff, and it'll be torn down soon and become the base of a new condo. But those old tile patterns and stuff make the old malls really these wonderful museums.
Yeah, and there are a lot of those still in London that feel like, even when I was a kid, there was something kind of like they seemed on the verge of collapse, and here they are, 35 years later, still kind of hanging in. Sherwood Forest Mall in London, like right beside the high school where I grew up, seems like it's been. I mean, the stores have shuffled around, and there's like a Good Life in there now, where there used to be Zellers that my sister worked at in the Skillet. The Zellers restaurant, which is actually a pretty good restaurant. It also has like a bit of a time locked feel to it, even when there are like attempts at updates and things like that. And there's like a real charm to that sort of thing, like the nostalgic in me is really excited by that kind of aesthetic and space, and just the feeling of walking around in a place like that. Mm-hmm. I dream about that mall all the time, about Sherwood Forest Mall.
Those malls that are like second tier malls, tertiary, like there's whole retail phrases about them. But like the malls that don't have all the chains and like indie mom and pop stores can afford to go into are really neat, because a lot of them become community centers, the morning mall walkers, but also old people hanging out, retirees, because there's nowhere else for them to hang out. I was talking to a person who runs a community center in Rexdale in the northwest corner of Toronto, around a lot of high rises, across from Albion Mall, which is one of those kind of malls. And she said that the mall management got in touch with them because they were being overrun with retirees, because we don't build places for old people to hang out. It's like once you're done working, it's like we can forget about you. And mm-hmm. the mall is that place for them. It's the community center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is something, that there are, libraries can be those spaces if they're big enough. Like the Central Branch in Toronto is massive, so that is like a community space. But like most libraries are tiny, and there's a mall. There's a library in Sherwood Forest Mall, and it's really small, so it doesn't really provide those same opportunities. But yeah, and I think especially like there's another mall. I don't even know the name of the mall in London. It's kind of on the same street down a little bit. That's kind of one by one, the stores in there have become Chinese and Vietnamese owned businesses. So there's now like a particular Asian community who kind of like frequents and hangs out at that mall. So I think it's like interesting how those become like culturally defined spaces too, where they can. It's interesting so what did the community center in Rexdale do? Are they starting some programming, or?
I think they pointed them to like some of the programs that they have going, and maybe some of the older folks didn't know about that. But I think it was beyond their capacity for most of it, right? They didn't have the resources, which pointed to this thing that we've overlooked, especially in an aging society. But those malls, like it's another one of those common things you see in malls that people hang out. They'll sit there near the Tim Hortons, and nurse a Tim Hortons double for hours and just talk, right? So they become these really important spaces. And I've talked to like some urbanists, people that pay attention to cities and all that sort of thing. And there tends to be this kind of snobbiness towards malls. Like a mall is like not the real place we should be thinking of, the main streets, and that's where like real kind of organic stuff happens. But the mall is a big part of life. Actually, in anticipation of our chat, and when I was reading the book, I had a little chat with the architecture critic for Curbed in New York City named Alexandra Lang, because she's finishing a book right now that's called American Mall, all about the mall's role in American society. And she said she has a chapter called Mall as a Work of Art. But she said in talking to other kind of architecture historians, there was a lot of snobbiness. Like people just didn't want to talk about the mall, despite the mall being where so many people are at.
Yeah, I've never really. I mean, people always say like I hate the mall, and I don't like shopping. Like it's shopping to me is a nightmare. Like the idea of going shopping is awful. It has nothing to do with what I like about going to the mall.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like to get some sort of strange food or drink that's only available in the mall, like an Orange Julius or like a muffin. Yeah, as something like that, and just kind of hang out. When I went to York University, and a friend and I would often, and she was from Newmarket, and we would often just take the subway down to Yorkdale, and just hang out at Yorkdale for like the day. And our friends couldn't understand what we were doing. They're like, "Oh, did you go to the movies? No. Did you buy anything? No. What'd you do? You just hung out at the mall like teenagers?" We're like, "Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. We just walked around." Like made dumb jokes, got some sort of like strange drink and just hung out and chatted. It was great. It's if you like people watching, it's a terrific place for that. And the snobbishness is like, I feel like those people just need to be like exposed properly to the mall. Like, take away their wallet and just say, don't even think about shopping. Like, let's just go to the mall and spend some time.
Yeah.
Enjoy the weird light. It's yeah.
What'd you call it? The flat light. You're always well lit from all angles.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
When I worked at the mall at that Music World thing, which I kind of liked because the conversations with people were interesting. Actually, you mentioned the body shop at Christmas. The body shop always seemed like the most erotic part of the mall for some reason. All those creams and ointments for mysterious places, but that lineup of men who were rushing in. People, often say like retail is terrible during the holiday season, but I actually kind of liked it because all these people that came in were not the usual kind of idle shoppers. It was people kind of on a mission to get this gift, and it wasn't the usual kind of mall rat. And I had the most interesting conversations with people during the holiday. So it was the kind of counterintuitive to what people always say about them all.
Yeah, I think, I mean, my I don't know if you had been working 25 years in Music World, if you would feel the same way, but I think
5 years was enough.
Yeah, as like a somewhat of like a retail tourist for me, my little stint at the body shop I found really interesting. Like I don't know if I was working there still, if I would feel the same way, but yeah, it was like a glimpse into a kind of like anthropology that I I had no exposure to before. Yeah. And the whole mall culture and the strange one-upmanship that happens between like competing managers at a body shop in a mall, like in a kind of like low-level backstabbing. And yeah, there was tons of drama that I just found, I mean, to me, looking in from the outside, like super entertaining.
Yeah, you pull into the book some kind of archetypal characters. One are the chicken teens. I loved it when you kept writing about the chicken teens who work at a chicken restaurant in the food court. And at one point they deliver the main character chicken, and and they smell of deep fryer and hormones, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it just evoked these characters I remember from that I haven't thought about in the 20 years since I worked at the mall. Like the guy at Mr. Sub across from Music World, who for some reason had all the mall gossip and also would talk crap about the Subway because Subway got their lettuce in a bag, whereas Mr. Sub shredded their lettuce themselves. And that made Mr. Sub much better.
It does. I mean, that's much more authentic.
But somehow he had access to the back hallways and he knew what was going on in other stores. So I just kind of amble over on my break and get the gossip because there was nothing else to do.
And the gossip would be incredible. It would be, people spend, a lot of time in those spaces and working. And it's not just the people working, we had, at the body shop, just the regulars who would come in every day, like as though it was a bar,
Yep.
and not necessarily buy anything, but just like come in and chat and say hi and, go on their way or whatever. But yeah, in the book, I guess like there's like a kind of novel about the mall that isn't really my novel because it's not about the subcultures and about the people of the mall. Like it's about the space of the mall, I guess, the aesthetic and and I guess what the mall in some way represents and embodies. I think that there's it's just amazing to me. There aren't more novels and movies and shows that are just like focused on malls. Like when I was thinking about, stuff to, contextualize the book, I mean, there's like Dawn of the Dead. I think there's like a Woody Allen movie that I've never seen and never will. And otherwise, I don't know. I feel like there's maybe a Nicholson Baker novel that takes place on an escalator in a mall.
That was one of the ones I was going to say reminded me of your book, Mezzanine.
Yeah, Mezzanine. That's right.
The whole book is just going up the escalator, and he ties his shoes, and he has all these kind of tangential thoughts. And sometimes your character, not to give away too much of the plot, but your character writes little reports about his observations or her observations at the mall. And the voice was different than the narrator's voice, which was the same person, but it kind of changed a little bit because it was more formal of report writing. And the reports kind of went off in all sorts of directions. And it did remind me of that I guess, famous postmodern Nicholson Baker Mall book.
Yeah, I don't think it's giving away too much that one of the requirements of this residency, there are 3 requirements. They're making work, engaging the public, and then writing these weekly progress reports. And this person who's inhabiting the mall does not produce work and has no idea what kind of work they should be producing. There's no public to engage. So the progress reports become this like really desperate attempt to fill empty space with something that looks like progress and something that maintains the enthusiasm of his initial application letter, which kind of opens the book. So they get more and more, they go more and more off the rails, I guess. But I also, I think in those 2, I was just trying to, work in this sort of the idea of like what's happening privately to this person, and then if this is the document, this is the sort of public-facing version of it. It's this attempt at sanitizing it and turning, something that's either sinister or threatening or alienating into an experience that on paper looks like, positive and as though he's having the time of his life. And this is also like a character who has like a very detached relationship to reality anyway. He doesn't understand even really what it means to get a haircut. Like just the basic processes of a day-to-day existence are a little bit beyond him. So the way that it's framed is like, an attempt to normalize what's not normal, but in then doing that, he makes it even stranger. So it was just meant to be this kind of like cascade of unreality that accumulates at the end of the book. I hope. That was the idea anyway.
Yeah, they do. Did you write them at the same time in your assembly line process?
Yeah, I had a process where so it was 12 parts, and each part was like kind of stretched over. Like each week I would write a section of it, and then the final week, so the first 3 weeks of every month I would write whatever that part was, and then the last week I would spend writing the progress report. So at the end of every month I would finish the part that I was working on and then write the progress report that was supposed to like reimagine what had just happened, or try and capture it in this like bizarre and kind of confused way. So yeah, and those were really fun to write. I had like the progress reports were the times that I made myself laugh the most. I think, which is like self-indulgent, but whatever. I mean, being a Canadian fiction writer, you know, for most of us, we aren't paid in the millions, so at least we can pay ourselves in chuckles every now and then.
The other book that came to mind when I was reading it was a childhood Canadian, speaking of Canadian authors, Eric Wilson, who wrote all those mystery novels of kids, like The Kootenai Kidnapper, and like he wrote them all over Canada in like Canadian.
There was one at the Banff Hotel or whatever.
Yeah, and I forget where the Toronto one was, but anyway, there was the West Edmonton Mall one, which I
never read that one.
I had to Google it today because I couldn't remember the title. And it was Code Red at the Super Mall from 1988, and I read that when I was, I guess, in grade 8 as a kid, and always wanted to go to the West Edmonton Mall. It was like up there with Canadian iconography or things to be proud of, like the CN Tower and the Rockies and the Sky Dome and the West Edmonton Mall, were like the things Canada has that other countries don't.
That was such a, like as a kid, it was like my dream to go to the West Edmonton Mall. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, just the idea that there's a water park inside the mall. And you imagine it as like, at least I did, as like a city-sized mall, you know, that just went forever, you know, with every store you could ever imagine, like almost like a, you know, Willy Wonka version of a shopping mall. Do you know the West Edmonton Mall gang sign?
No.
Edmonton.
Oh man, is that real?
I don't know. Someone told me that once, and I just thought it was so clever.
The first time I went to Edmonton as an adult, like that was the first place I went.
Oh, I can't imagine why. You know, in the '80s, I probably would have like Wayne Gretzky. If it had been a choice of meeting Wayne Gretzky or going to the West Edmonton Mall, I definitely would have chosen the mall.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it has all these things that you don't even hear about beyond like the water park and the roller coaster. There's a shooting range in the mall. And the shooting range, I went in to look at it, and then you come out of the shooting range, and the Simons department store is right next door, the Montreal or the Quebec department store. And within like 50 steps from a shooting range where people are shooting guns, you get into like the funky gold lame underpants section of young men. It's just like the clashing of cultures in like next door to each other, all indoors, and then down the hallway is a dolphin show.
What? Really?
It's like the jumping dolphins
in a mall.
Unless they got rid of them, and I'm imagining that. There used to be a dolphin show.
Taken a video camera to the West Edmonton Mall and walked around for a few hours. It sounds weirder than my book. I mean, there's a pony in my book. I thought that was ridiculous, but like dolphins or multiple dolphins.
There were, but now I'm second guessing if the mythology of the place was were the dolphins taken away because of you know, we frown upon having dolphins in the mall now, or were there actually dolphins there? I know there was a roller coaster accident. That was a tragedy. Somebody, I think at least one person died. But otherwise, that mall is like a weird one because it's owned by one family. It's not like part of a big chain. So
it's not a CF.
Yeah, or an Oxford Properties or whatever the other ones are. So it has, and it's so big that it has this quirkiness that it doesn't have like the kind of corporate head office that makes them all the same, which I didn't really appreciate until I was there that time. And then like, oh, this is like, it's like somebody, it's like independent of some head office. They're making their own decisions here, turning it into a unique place.
That's cool, and I guess it's, you know, it's still open, which is kind of amazing. Yeah, I've been sort of like thinking about just for my own entertainment, the possibility of writing some kind of sequel to this book. I have no idea if that will ever actually happen. And I'm like trying to think about what the next, like if this book takes place in a mall, you know, where the next one, like what sort of location would make the most sense. And I have like two or three ideas, but I don't know. What would you like? What's another place like this? You know, can you think of something?
The same way I like to walk around malls, just to walk around malls. The two places that come to mind are airports, because they're like big self-contained motherships, but also casinos. Like,
I was going to ask you specifically about casinos because of Windsor and the casino there, and because I hate gambling. Like I don't deplore it morally, but other people, I just don't enjoy it for myself. I don't really like doing it, but I kind of like going to casinos as well. Like I find the atmosphere in the casino kind of like compelling. And they're also kind of, I mean, there are variations obviously, I've never been to Las Vegas, but I've been to Atlantic City and I've been to casinos in all kinds of strange places. And there's still like there's a thread between them that is kind of feels consistent.
There's a professor at U of T who would take his students on walks through the Eaton Center. Ted Ralph was his name, I think urban geography professor. And he would get into the Eaton Center and say, this is a machine made for taking money from your wallet, which is the same thing that casinos are. You know, these places without windows, so you don't see the sun changing or the sun going down. But the Windsor Casino, it's big, but it nothing compares to like the Vegas ones on the Strip because they're so big and they're kind of attached to one another, and you can kind of walk through them, and each one has their own scent pumped in. Once somebody told me that they have their own scent to sort of mask the smell of cigarettes and I guess losing. That it just became this almost saccharine thing that I would notice all the time, how one casino smelled like this, one casino smelled like that. Sorry to keep going on about this, but when I was finishing my last book, I needed to leave Toronto just to finish it. And I went to Vegas because it's cheap to stay there and it was kind of warm and it was the winter. So I went for 10 days and I would write by the day and then just go for walks in the casino all night. And just like, it was just so, and I don't gamble either. And it was just so relaxing to watch people.
Yeah. There's a question.
There is, yeah. Okay, here's a question. There's a really interesting story of a mall in Marseille, France, where digging the foundation for the building revealed ancient ruins belonging to a Greek port dating back to the Roman Empire. To preserve that part of the city's history, they constructed the mall around the dig site and incorporated a history museum. Do you think there's much hope for other places allowing corporate space and heritage historical space to coexist?
That sounds like a question for you, Shawn. What do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess if it's built on top of something that is archaeological, though I'm sure our malls are. They probably discovered things and just kind of pushed them over a little bit. There's a hotel in Quebec City, in the old part of Quebec City, down by the lake, the river, outside of the walls, Auberge de something Saint Antoine. Anyway, it was built over historic ruins of old Quebec City, and they have these kind of glass floors when you're in the hotel looking over it. So that's kind of interesting potential. And in Malta, there's a little mall in Valletta that has the same thing of glass over the kind of Roman ruins below.
There's like a kind of cynical post-colonial anti-capitalist answer to this question. And that is like corporate space as an extension of, imperialism and colonialism is kind of inherently antithetical and destructive of our heritage and historical space, as far as that space being indigenous. So like every fucking mall is built on land that it doesn't belong on and is in some way has buried something beneath it. So, if all of our corporate space in North America were really going to try and become a history museum, we should bulldoze every single thing. So that's my cute answer to that question.
Kill them all for real.
Yeah. Yeah, or I mean, there can be a more conscientious attempt at something that looks like reconciliation, but I can't imagine it happening within capitalism and the way space is corporatized and privatized as it is. I mean, the way we've been talking about the mall is a little, I mean, it's idealistic and it's a little facetious, and it's got, there's blind spots around it a little bit, but so that's the cynical version, and then I guess the nice version is, yeah, sure, like let's think about ways in which we can inhabit space that actively engage with history and heritage, which I hope is one of the things that's coming out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, for all of us, and that this is like a project that is actively going on all the time. I mean, that's my hope.
Mhm.
And I'm like a lot of people who aren't Indigenous trying to figure out how to engage in that process as best I can, or in whatever way I can. But yeah, I don't know. There's kind of two answers to that question. It's probably not what this, I'm sure, kind person wanted to hear from me.
Yeah, but it was a good question, because the malls are such sanitized places with top-down corporate things that, like, how do you bring in kind of more complicated things? One thing that I wanted to mention that reminded me again of Windsor and the casino in 1995, the temporary, no, or 93, it doesn't matter. Early to mid 90s, the casino opened, Ontario's first. Thank you, Bob Ray. And they needed to have a temporary building, so they housed it in the Art Gallery of Windsor, right on the riverfront, looking at Detroit, and they kicked the art gallery out. And so the art gallery temporarily moved to the mall, the main mall, Devonshire Mall, into the old abandoned Marks and Spencer department store. And everyone was like, all the art people were just like, this is a travesty, et cetera, et cetera. But that's been studied now, because the art gallery's attendance skyrocketed. Like they brought the art to where people were, and they had never seen such attendance before. And then the art gallery, out of this casino deal, got a new place on the waterfront. And when they moved back to their nice new museum, nice new building, attendance kind of went back down to where it was.
This is an amazing story. I didn't know this. This is yeah, wow, that's really interesting.
It made my lunch hours from Music World very interesting, because I'd go into the art gallery, which is a totally different space. It's quiet. You walk differently there.
Yeah.
You interact differently with people. It was a real kind of experiment, and it's been studied by museum curator types as a case study.
Yeah. Maybe that's the future of malls. Like, if the buildings continue to exist, maybe they start to become spaces for art and art making. Yeah.
But also, like, your residency reminded me too of here in Toronto. There's a thing called the Mayor's Year of Public Art. This is the Year of Public Arts. It's a John Tory thing, and they're funding all kinds of initiatives. A little bit postponed right now because of COVID, so it might be the Years of Public Art. But some of the hubs that they're trying to set up, or going to set up, because they don't want it to be just a downtown thing, are going to be in at least one or two of the malls. Cloverdale Mall, and possibly one in Scarborough, and just taking over an old storefront. And artists will go there and do their thing, or kind of use it as a base into the community. So your fiction is not so far removed from reality.
Well, about 2/3 of the way writing this book, I discovered that the Mall of America had developed a writer in residence position. So there actually was. I don't know if they lived in the mall, but they were the writer in residence of the Mall of America. Which was kind of, at the time I was like initially dismayed, and then I was like, no, this is amazing. This is, I couldn't ask for anything better to be actually happening.
I would apply for that.
Yeah, sure.
I got off track with the casino thing because I got too into it, but is there another space like that you were thinking of? Like airports, casinos, that?
Yeah, I just like abandoned, I really like abandoned amusement parks, like in theme parks. Like I don't know. I'm just thinking what I'm attracted to aesthetically. I don't have like a personal relationship with theme parks. A lot of the one of the things that I found sort of interesting in COVID were these like massive cruise ships that became like floating kind of prisons in a way, where they were, not allowed to dock. So I don't know. Again, it's just like thinking about these, massive structures and emblems of a certain kind of capitalism where the purpose has been upended, whether, circumstantially or actively by people. But yeah, I haven't really figured it out yet, or even if I want to write another one of these books. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
The ending does allow for a sequel.
It might. Yeah, that wasn't the idea when I, not to give away the ending, but yeah, it wasn't. I was like, oh God, I can move on to the next project now. Like I'm sure with you, as soon as you finish it, you're like, okay, yeah, phew. The thought of writing anything with the idea of a series in mind is like unimaginable to me. But yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I got other stuff, other projects that I am not working on currently that I probably should be. So those first, and then maybe some other continuation of this. I don't know.
Maybe just one or two more questions before we wrap up. What your character at one point mentions watching the various gates of people in the mall, which I kind of love that observation. I've noticed like the Eaton Center is an interesting one in downtown Toronto because it's downtown and it's busy. You got the busy streetscape outside, but then you have the mall and they're right next door to each other. It's not surrounded by a big parking lot. It's a different kind of mall. And I notice often when I walk through the city, I'll cut through the Eaton Center because I like it, because it's cool, but also in the summer it's cool, it's air conditioned, or it's heated in the winter, right? You get these kind of indoor-outdoor passages. But the way people walk is so different. Out on the street, there's like a mission that people have, like people are getting somewhere, especially if it's like during the week and the business people are out. And then the moment you go through the doors of the mall, it's just like you almost run into them because they walk so differently. They're zigzagging around. So like capitalist shopping walking is so different than, I guess, capitalist work, getting to where you're going, walking outside, which then made me think of in Toronto, the PATH system, which is the underground network of tunnels that connect all the skyscrapers together, which is like 27 kilometers long, which is basically like a mall, but mostly like Starbuckses and Grand & Toys and that sort of thing. And that's a totally different kind of mall walking because it's during the day, it's like full of business people. And if you're there at like 5 p.m., it's just like salmon all going towards the subway or towards Union Station, which is weird to be in a mall, but everyone's in a rush rather than kind of languorously shopping.
Yeah. Have you seen Way Downtown?
Yeah.
Set in the past in Edmonton, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was, something we ignored, I guess, when we were talking about malls, because that is a mall. I mean, those things are lined with stores. They're, so that movie, for anyone interested, is about a bunch of people who make a bet that they won't breathe the outdoor air for a year, I think, or something, and they try to inhabit only the paths and that go directly to their condos and indoor spaces. I'm interested. You brought up the museum walk, and the art gallery walk, which are similar but different kinds of, ways that we move through space, like that will alter our pace and gait. And I find that stuff really kind of compelling too, to think about, the way that, I don't know if personality and gait are connected. Like if we, if the way we're moving through space influences how we interact with other people or who we are. But it is something in the mall. I hadn't noticed the zigzagging, but there's a kind of like ponderous walk that kind of happens sometimes. Or there's the, rage walk. Mm-hmm. Like I picture, my dad might be listening, but I've seen him rage walk through a mall at Christmas, like with his coat flapping open and just like, oh my God, get me the hell out of here kind of walk. So, are there more?
I see one more question. Hold on. Let's see. One final audience question. Hi, both. I wondered if you had any strong opinions about Galleria Mall in London, which was the one I grew up going to in its prime, and then later when it became a husk of itself.
Yeah, and the same person, Sky Gooden, has comments, said it was a failure to revitalize downtown London and it took out so much vital architecture. Can a mall exist in downtown setting, or does it need to be in the suburbs in order to function best? And also follow up or a recommendation. I don't like, again, I'm not like a urban geographer. Shawn, you're better to answer but I think like what attracts me to the mall, I mean, the Eaton Center is a downtown mall that's done pretty well. There are other downtown malls that I think like, you know, I have friends that work for the City of London who can answer that question specifically to what has gone wrong in so many ways with the downtown core of London, Ontario, but I'm not the person to tell you those things. Like, I like, you know, I grew up in London, a city, but in, you know, a kind of suburban environment, you know, like in the ways in which suburban environments are like tend to be generic and like largely corporatized. And I don't want to discredit any of the like amazing human stuff and stories that still happens in places like that, you know, that people still make connections and fall in love, and, you know, all kinds of interesting things can still happen. So like, I don't know about the Galleria in London. I also like the Galleria. I mean, I worked in the Muse, which is right next door, and the Galleria was where we would go like to eat or, you know, feel human. Good light in the Galleria. I think it's called City Plaza now.
Yeah. It had all the skylights all the way down, kind of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It has really good light in there. It's actually really nice. A lot of plants too.
Yeah, to me it seemed like the big city, because Windsor didn't have a downtown mall, which was kind of dodging a bullet because a lot of them didn't work. The Eaton Center being an exception to the rule.
Yeah, I guess there's other places downtown for people to go, but in London, you had to get people downtown in the first place, which they've been trying to do for decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the struggle of a car-oriented town without a critical mass of people living downtown. So London is not the only one that struggled with that sort of thing. Many American cities, Sarnia, even Chatham had, you know, downtown malls that they tried. So so I guess it's good to end on, you know, a killed mall. Since we're
talking about it's still open.
Yeah. Anyway, this is great. It's a really fun book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Not just because I like malls and I kind of it triggers a lot of my nostalgia for the places, but just as a study of, you know, where people hang out and how people interact. It really, it was very entertaining, and also just like, yeah, I've seen that before.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Pasha.
Thanks so much, Shawn and Pasha, for sharing your thoughts and insights on all things mall. And thanks to everyone for tuning in from home. You can order your copy of Kill the Mall from the Another Story bookshop website at anotherstory.ca. And we also, as I mentioned at the beginning, we want to invite you to visit our brand new Book of the Month playlist on this YouTube channel to watch our March book talk with Ghost Lake author Nathan Negan Newton Adler and publisher Kateri Akawenzi Dam. We'll be back with another City Imagines event in April, where we'll speak with Selena Caesar Chavanis and Sherry DeNovo about their new memoirs. And to support The Word on the Street and events like this one, please visit toronto.thewordonthestreet.ca and click the donate button. Thanks for joining us, and have a great evening.